Mr. Ahmad Wakaf, the director of the Gnosos think tank, joining us live here on RT International. Great to see you today. So Putin and Trump agreeing to continue joint efforts to battle ISIL, although according to senior officials, ISIL is on the verge of being eradicated. I suppose at this stage in the war, what kind of joint efforts are they referring to now?
Well, I think the main joint effort is not to clash, because the Syrian army, backed by Russia, Iran and so on, is making headway against Daesh, and at the same time there are forces, the Syrian Democratic Forces, backed by the United States, are making progression against Daesh at the same time. Now, there haven't been clashes recently. Well, there's been some tension but no clashes, and probably the two parties would want to make sure that there are no clashes in the near future. So at least they need to form some sort of a base for deconfliction between the two allies, or the two alliances, so to speak. And then they need also to have a look at the future and see whether they can fine-tune their views and probably and hopefully their actions as well.
Do you think, though, it's potentially symbolic that Trump and Putin have put out this joint statement on Syria? Because many have said that these two players are ultimately on either side of the fence with the war in Syria. Is it symbolic?
It's not that symbolic, no. Well, first of all, we've seen this coming, although it wasn't so sure that it would come out. Because the Americans were saying, well, we're a bit worried that, for example, the Astana process is taking now center stage, and now there is this new Sochi Syrian dialogue sort of conference that the Russians have called for, and basically they would want to make sure that everything falls into the internationally recognized framework of Security Council 2254 and the Geneva process. Now, they might want to trade something for that, or for ensuring that. They've probably been worried. And some of the factions that they support, some of the opposition that they support, might have been worried. The Russians are calling all the shots at the moment. So with the Americans trying to make sure of something, they must have brought something else to the table to say to the Russians, look, we're willing to trade on this if you can ensure that the Geneva process is still paramount. And what we see from the very short statement or very short details, very few details we have, is that the Americans and the Russians have agreed on key issues. A, to have the Geneva process still center stage, and also when it comes to future elections, that they would be supervised by the United Nations, and that Syrians outside Syria might be able to participate in. So that's some sort of a progress. But at the same time, it's good to have them agreeing on something rather than having this summit going on without them agreeing on anything, which would have been a huge disappointment.
As you say, regarding the talks, the US is involved with the Geneva talks, but when it comes to the Astana talks, the US has essentially been shut out of those talks. So, Mr. Wakaf, let's discuss the spoils of war here. Syria, known for its huge oil and gas reserves, and now US-backed Kurdish fighters from the north remain in control of most of the oil fields in the east of Syria. Of course, once an enormous cash source for Daesh and the ISIL mercenaries and terrorists. Assad says he wants to take all of his fields back. Could that be the next stage of confrontation, the east of Syria, where the oil fields are?
Well, we'll see what sort of confrontation it would be, whether it would be only a diplomatic confrontation or it would actually go down to a military one. The fact of the matter is that, President Assad, the Syrian government, have all the legitimacy in terms of international law to take every inch back of Syrian land from whatever flag that raises there or from whatever forces. But the most important thing here is that it needs, it bolsters, it maintains the Syrian government legitimacy within Syria to have all these places returned home, so to speak. So, in a sense, President Assad has no other alternative but to go for every part of Syria that is currently not under Syrian flag. Now, the Americans, the Turks, and other parties who support militants on the ground who control, for example, Idlib province, south of Daraa, the eastern and northern part of Syria, eastern of the Euphrates, where, as you rightly say, the oil fields are aware of this, but probably they're trying to hold on to a position where they can force some sort of a backing down from the Syrian government on key issues like a political settlement, whereby the Syrian government would be more open to bring in opposition figures and so on and so forth. So it's still contested, and we think this is the shape of the next few months and probably, hopefully not, but years also of the confrontation within Syria. But definitely the Syrian government, they would want to go for every single inch of Syria back. That's what they're there for, in a sense.
Well, Mr. Wakaf, I'm running very low on time here. Very, very quickly, I must ask you, you just mentioned the political process of the Assad government. What is the political future of Syria?
Well, it will all depend. It's very complex, but it would all depend on what Syrians would accept. So the Syrian government cannot out of the blue say, well, we're going to include this faction who's, for example, based in Riyadh or based in Cairo or whatever. They would have some sort of ability to convince their constituency, which is the millions of Syrians who currently live under government-controlled areas in Syria. They would need to convince them of that. Otherwise, the Syrian government basically won't be able to include anyone. Now, the more an international accord happens around this sort of inclusive process, the more likely the Syrian government would be able to convince its constituency and not have any issues. But then there is also the flip back of, if we bring people who are based in Riyadh, who are very much connected, for example, to the Saudis, or Istanbul to the Turks, would they be really free to say what they want to say and, govern as what Syrians would have them? We've seen, for example, Saad al-Hariri debacle in Saudi Arabia now, it turns out that he's more of a vassal than a Lebanese prime minister, so that's another issue to tackle. It's very complex, it will take a long time, but hopefully it will turn out right in the end.
Well, we appreciate getting your insight to help shed some light on this. As you say, a very complex situation. Amar Wakaf, the director of the Gnosos think tank. Thank you so much for joining us here on RT International.
Thanks for having me.
Greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
The death toll from a strong earthquake that struck western Iran has risen to at least 207, with over 2,500 others injured.
In the early daylight hours, 19 helicopters were dispatched to the area for relief operations. Rescue teams from neighboring provinces were also deployed to affected areas.
The quake was felt in 14 provinces across the country, but Kermanshah and Ilam were the most affected ones. Some roads have been blocked in the two provinces, and many people are left without water and electricity. Rescue teams have stepped up their efforts to help those trapped under the rubble. The U.S. Geological Survey said the magnitude 7.3 quake was centered outside the eastern Iraqi city of Halabja in Suleymaniya province. People in Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Kuwait felt tremors as well. Our correspondent Tamid Javani gives us more updates about the situation in the affected areas.
The number of the people who have been reported to be dead is pretty much expected to rise given the infrastructure in those areas that were mostly affected. According to officials, no dams have been affected by the earthquake. This is a very significant news because well, if it was so, it would have we would have expect more devastations in the area. During these events and incidents, all the organizations, all the relevant organizations joined forces in order to speed up the rescue operation in there, as it has been ordered by the President Hassan Rouhani, who has said in an emergency meeting for all the relevant organizations to join forces in order to facilitate the rescue operation, which is underway.
Leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, has offered his condolences over a tragic earthquake that hit the country's west. Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei has called on authorities to mobilize all their resources to help the quake victims. The leader said all military and state institutions must help with relief operations to remove the debris, transfer the injured, reach out to the quake-stricken people, and keep the death toll from rising. Ayatollah Khamenei has also called on all Iranians to help the victims and contribute to relief operations if they can.
All right, check this out here. This is the test of the emergency broadcast system that I happened to catch here. Check this out. They're going to say chemical spill, and this is only a test.
This is a coordinated monthly test of the emergency alert system. Broadcasters in our area are testing the equipment that can quickly warn you in the event of emergencies. If this had been an actual emergency such as flooding, high winds, or a chemical spill, official messages would have followed this tone. This station serves the Sacramento Valley and Sierra Nevada foothill counties. This concludes this test of the emergency alert system.
So, what are they saying? That possibly one of those things later may occur? Of course, I live in the northern state, and you know that they've been doing all kinds of events with fires. They're preparing you to go to your FEMA center so they can put that chip in you.
This is Dabu 7, an earthquake update. As you can see here on the EQ map, we've had a large earthquake strike in the Iraq region. This is registering a 7.4 right now. That is off the geoscience feed. We'll zoom in here. You can see that this is northeast of Baghdad. This was only 52 kilometers in depth. You can see Kirkuk there. Ramadi, Baghdad, right there. So I'm sure the people in Baghdad felt this. We're still waiting to get some of the details in terms of damage, but a 7.2 earthquake is a large earthquake, especially when hitting on mainland and hitting fairly shallow. So I'm sure there's going to be some damage done here in this, and we'll wait to see what kind of info we get on this as to the damage done. But here's a zoomed in look at the region. No major cities right there where it struck, but the closest being Baghdad that we've seen on the map there in terms of big cities. So that's the latest. I'll continue to update as I get more information. Make sure to follow me on Twitter for those latest details. I'll leave links below. This has been Dabu 7 with an earthquake update.
So we got us another false flag event, and why am I calling this a false flag event? Well, because quite simply put, you know that Esau has weather warfare, and so we know he's the cause of these earthquakes as well as these hurricanes and everything else. That quite simply put, to get his foot in the door in Iran, he can't just directly go to war with Iran. But what he can do, and he would attack Iraq to do it, of course, is shoot nuclear missiles underneath the ground, causing an earthquake. We can best believe that Esau has manufactured this event. And so what you have is an earthquake over there. Now, I had a vision a couple of years ago while I was asleep that a tsunami had come to Basra. You know, I was checking out the Persian Gulf Coast. I was visiting there, and so, you know, in this, I had seen a tsunami come and hit Basra, taking it out. And, you know, tsunamis don't normally happen, just like earthquakes don't normally happen in Iraq or in Iran, but in this dream it happened. So, you know, is this a possibility that Esau's going to do some more stuff? Well, it certainly looks like that because, of course, they got to do a false narrative to make you think that, some terrorist affiliated with ISIS went into a church and shot a bunch of people, to distract from the bigger picture. I think I'll probably be out there on the streets tomorrow. Like I said, had bronchitis for over a week and, still had like a frog in my throat when I tried to talk, but found enough energy. Hello and welcome to In Revelation Times. The word of Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahshai, differs with everything we've been taught. I also want to give double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth in sincerity, because before that, I was just searching for the truth, and they brought me to the full truth, I was already exposing Esau, which I knew as the Illuminati, the Cabal, Occupy Jerusalem, the Israeli state in Levant. Now know them as their proper name, the Amalekites that are spoken of, the ones that King Saul was supposed to slew, but he didn't do it. He left enough of them alive, so they became Amalek of today, which are those Khazars who pretend to be Jews, who are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. That's what I was exposing before, but, I was just doing a lesson like I normally do in front of the camera, and then, he overcame me. That is the Most High, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahshai overcame me in the Spirit, and I said, by the way, those are not the real Jews of the Bible. The real Jews of the Bible are still in slavery today. They have not returned to the land. They went over into the suburbs of Africa, then eventually were taken on slave ships. You call them black people. So I talked about how they would still be in slavery till this day. And of course, do some further reading and all that, found out that it was true. That blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, in fact, did escape the attacking, during the time of the Assyrian Empire, ended up over here. But then eventually Judah would be overcome as well. That is in 70 A.D., which they don't want you to know about this, but the abomination of desolation had taken place then. This whole 7-year period had actually happened in 70 A.D., and it's actually in the Apocrypha, 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 54. But Esau wants you to believe that a future Antichrist will come, and he'll conquer Jerusalem, and he'll rule over there. There'll be a 7-year tribulation. He'll bring peace upon the earth, and there'll be, then in the middle of the 7-year peace agreement, he'll break it. You've been hearing this shit for years if you're like me, and before you came to this truth, you were indoctrinated with Christianity, which is the big deception of Esau, because, of course, you're calling upon a name that's not even his, it's just quite simply put, and then you got the image that goes with it, which does not fit the biblical description of our Lord and Savior. That this whole Cesare Borgia image, the Christ image, ain't even the Son of the Most High at all. In fact, he's a mortal man, lives today as David Rothschild, and that's who these Borgias are, the Rockefeller-Rothschild family. And so they want you to worship them. So now, and then you got the hell doctrine, you got everything else that you've been brainwashed with, but yet it didn't make any sense. Well, how can you, if he would send you to this eternal place of fire and torment and punishment, which that's actually talking about the lake of fire, and that is when everything goes up in a mushroom cloud, which is what Esau's war is about to do, is send everything up in a mushroom cloud. This place, America, Babylon the Great, will be destroyed. And, that's why even at one time they were doing nuclear drills and shit like that, getting people prepared for that. But Esau doesn't want his people prepared for that. They want distractions like bullshit shootings and, because, let's face it, no fucking nut went in the fucking church and shut it up. This whole thing is nothing more than a Clint Eastwood movie. Everything's a stage. The whole fucking thing is an illusion. His greatest illusion is the television, And so whenever we come against that, he wants to call that fake news when, in fact, the news, the mainstream news is fake. It's bullshit, but he wants to say that we're bullshit by calling us fake news, because we're exposing them. And you got a lot of Edomites exposing them because Esau doesn't give two shits about the average Edomite. No, he doesn't. That's why he poisons the air, the food, the water. He'll do that to kill us Jakes, but he'll also do it to his own, So, you have confusion of faces out there, and this is the biggest weapon against Esau, because you have people that look like him, but are prophesying against him out there. Totally tears down his stronghold. So we've been going after Christianity. And also another thing, though, is another brother, GMS Sharamoth channel, did a whole lesson on heart things, and that hawthorn berries and COQ10, that you should have these things in your diet, even if you don't have heart problems. It's just good to have a flow of these things, so that way it doesn't lead to further problems, Changing diet has everything to do with it, and definitely pray about it, because I just found out that my wife has heart murmur, and that's because there's an extra sound there, and so she's not getting the current flow. So obviously I'm going to invest in these things, and hopefully a good thing will turn out. Of course, during this cold, I've been, gargling with salt water and baking soda together. Very easy to afford. And then, of course, apple cider vinegar, doesn't cost a whole lot. But these are, normal remedies. Of course, echinacea with golden seal also helps fight bacteria, but just also builds up your immune system to where when you do get hit with a cold, you don't have to go through it as long. Unfortunately, with bronchitis infections, though, those ones take a little while, especially if you have prior asthma. So the best thing you can do is ride it, but at the same time, though, still take your inhaler and but try to gargle with salt water and, of course, baking soda added to it. Esau won't tell you that. Of course not. Because there's like a natural cure for just about anything, He doesn't want you to be cured. He wants you to depend upon him. Because he ultimately wants to chip you, wants to put the chip in you. Which is the mark of the beast. Don't let anybody else tell you that it's not the mark of the beast. Because quite simply put, they're either paid off or they're just liars or they just don't know this. This word ain't just given to just anybody. We're out there, we're teaching, we're on the streets prophesying. But not everybody gets it. They're not meant to get it. But we're still to prophesy it anyways because we don't know who it is that may be among that elect. Like I'm out here in Reading alone, on the streets prophesying, and I don't know who's going to come up. For right now I'm talking to the camera and nobody's paying attention to me, but I don't know who's going to come up or who might click on that video on YouTube. So you always want to do a good presentation, and try to present things. Not trying to be a fucking copycat, a parrot, just copying somebody else's lesson, but, just try to cover the basics, you try to cover the basics so it will somewhat sound like you're parroting, but at the same time, making sure that you understand scriptures and how to break down everything, especially if you've been watching these videos for 6 months or more. Try to fellowship with others. That's another thing, I've been trying to fellowship with others, so, I encourage everyone that watches these videos, give me a call. My number is 530-768-1639. If you have to rewind this just to get that, it's 530-768-1639. I'd love to talk to you, about what's going on if you're a real brother in this truth, so that way I can at least fellowship once a week, and have that fellowship like Apostle Tahar says, 3 videos a week, 10 minutes or more, and then, of course, fellowship with a brother. And if you can, get to a camp, or if you're leading a camp, do that every week, And that's not because it's a burden, but that's just what we are to do. This should actually be a comfort, not a burden. It should be a comfort knowing that, okay, this is what I can do before the Most High comes. I don't have to stay in this fucked state. We are all fucked. But, we don't have to stay in this fucked up state, that there's hope for us. And when we go out there prophesying, it kind of makes us happy because we know that there's a better place finally. You know how it is when somebody dies and you're not sure whether they made it, as they say, Oh, well, did he make it to heaven or did he, And Esau just tries to say, oh, well, he's in heaven, da-da-da-da-da. And you don't really know. Well, this, bringing forth the truth and all that, you know that there's a next kingdom to come. And really, truly, when a person dies, they go up to the Father in heaven, who is Yahweh, and he looks back on your life and he gives you sentences on how you come back, So You know, if you're a brother that died in this truth before, you know, the nuclear missiles came, before the day of the Lord, the day of Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahshai, when he sends his son forth, you know, but you were in this truth, you resisted the mark, and, you know, you were vigilant to the end, you're going to be a part of that first resurrection, you know, as well. So, you know, if you were to die tomorrow, but you have all this truth and all that, and you did something about it, you get to come back in as part of the first fruits anyway, so, you know, why not have this? So that's what makes it a comfort to come out each week and do these things, you know, have sit-downs, you know. Like everything else, though, you know, what else is there here in Babylon? There's no hope here. Fuck, you think the economy's getting any better? No, they're about to roll out another fucking bailout program. How well did that work back in 2007, 2008? You know, George Bush started the bailout program, then Barack Obama came along. You know, did that help anything? You don't give them money when they fucked it up to begin with. You know, so you know that everything's going to fall. And they show you this shit in the Simpson cartoon, Donald Trump being president, and then Lisa Simpson comes president afterwards, after Donald Trump fucked everything up. Kind of like Arnold Schwarzenegger over here in California. Everybody thought, oh great, we have the governor, you know. They had Arnold Schwarzenegger would make a pretty good governor. How well did that turn out? Things got even more fucked up. See, people, you know, expect these politicians to be honest and all that, and all they do is reflect the so-called white man, these Edomites, you know. And fucking most Edomites don't even know what the fuck they want. They're so fucking confused and stupid, you know. So you really expect their images, their politicians, to be any different? You think these politicians come out from nowhere? No, it's just like what George Carlin was saying, you know, if you caught the prior videos where I show them. That's why I encourage everybody to subscribe to both channels, and Revelation Times and Confused to Face Reading. That way you have both of them, and, you know, you can catch all these things. And the reason why I do it in like 2 hours or so on the End Revelation Times videos, I figure that most fucking people sit there and they'll watch goddamn fucking Good Morning America for 2 hours, and it's nothing but bullshit. And they'll watch the fucking View at fucking 10 o'clock, nothing but bullshit, Illuminati programming. So I tried to put things that is going on, what's really going on, what they're trying to hide, and, you know, analyzing the events, but also bringing biblical scriptures, you know, seeing how that applies. Showing you that the devil is Esau, the so-called white man, and that he comes to deceive. And Christianity's been one of the main deceptions of Esau, you know, this Christ illusion, you know. And this Jesus juice will get you killed, like another brother put out, you know. So, you know, I try to edify others, you know, that are teaching this truth, and try to back it as best as possible. And that's what we're to do, back each other, you know. That's our comfort, you know, when we can back each other, you know. Not to be a parrot just driving off, but, you know, sometimes it's good to back a brother when it's like, you know, I hadn't thought about that in a while. Oh, I remember that guy, he did a lesson on that, and now I'm seeing this over here, and that's actually making more sense now as to another lesson that another brother did, and you just want to edify it. That's what we are to do, is to edify each other. So I hope this has been edifying, and like everything else, love to have fellowship with you elect that's out there, you know, or just if you're just barely coming into this truth, we'd love to have fellowship with you so we can grow in this thing together, man, because this is our hope. There is no hope in Babylon the Great except that finally it gets what it deserves and it gets destroyed. And we're watching it fall piece by piece. There's more homeless Edomites than there are Jakes now, you know, especially if you're here in Reading, you see mostly homeless Edomites. So they're finally getting what they deserve. You know, they pillaged our villages, pilfered everything, took it, settled here. Well, now it's happening to them. They lost their house, they lost their job, they lost their security. How's it fucking feel to know that you had something, now they're just going to take it from you? Well, we're starting to see justice. Most of all, this day of the Lord is justice for the righteous. So hopefully you're part of the elect. Hopefully we're part of the elect. See what I mean? So just trying to get better over that. Hopefully I'm a little bit better tomorrow. Shalom.
Did ISIS leaders escape Syria with U.S. and British assistance, or was this a humanitarian effort gone awry? RT's David Miller examines a report detailing the battle in Syria to rid the world of terror.
When does the U.S. law of war go against its own well-being, including on a global scale? This question is no more prominent than ever in the fight against ISIS at home and abroad. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of Defense James Mattis argued that the UN allows for the U.S. to attack ISIS wherever they may be around the globe, thus to prevent ISIS 2.0. Yet the Syrian Foreign Ministry is calling for the immediate withdrawal of U.S. troops in the country. And now the BBC is reporting that the U.S.-led coalition was reportedly part of a deal that allowed hundreds of Islamic State militant group fighters to leave the besieged eastern city of Raqqa. On October 10th, the Combined Joint Task Force for Operation Inherent Resolve released a statement that the Raqqa Civil Council, in conjunction with local Arab tribal elders, is taking a special interest in protecting civilians and preventing a significant humanitarian crisis. The coalition director of operations said, "We have a responsibility to defeat Daesh while preserving civilian life to the greatest extent possible." In fact, the Department of Defense Law of War Manual, Section 15.16.1, allows for the discretion of the neutral state in offering asylum to belligerent forces seeking refuge. On October 14th, the task force released a statement that a convoy of vehicles is staged to depart Raqqa under an agreement brokered by the Raqqa Civil Council and local Arab tribal leaders during an October 12th meeting, under which the agreement included that the people departing Raqqa are subject to search and screening by Syrian Democratic Forces. The task force also insists that the coalition was not involved in the discussions, but would save innocent lives. The U.S. is obligated, again by law, when possible, to notify civilians of pending attacks to prevent civilian casualties. The coalition was very careful also to announce that the U.S. does not condone any arrangements that allow terrorists to escape Raqqa without facing justice. And the BBC is reporting that the convoy included some of the most dangerous and most notorious members of ISIS, and despite reassurances from dozens of foreign fighters. And U.S. leaders are rejecting the BBC claims of a secret deal and points to said releases that were widely available, even on Twitter. So the obvious question is, what legal premise does the U.S. have in the battle in Syria? Did they know of the ISIS leaders on that convoy? Do we still have their location? Or has the U.S. helped in the spread of ISIS leaders beyond the Syrian borders? Questions that could have devastating answers for much of the United States in the name of humanitarian efforts. Reporting from Washington, D.C., David Miller, RT America.
Now to Iraq, where security forces have reportedly found mass graves containing at least 400 bodies buried in an area recently reclaimed from the self-proclaimed Islamic State. That's according to an Iraqi official. The bodies of civilians and security forces were found at an abandoned base near the northern town of Hawajah, the governor of Kirkuk, Rakan Syed, said. During 3 years of control under the so-called Islamic State, a local shepherd who led the troops to the site told officials the fighters were known for bringing captives to the area and shooting them dead or lighting them on fire. This comes as Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi released a statement saying the damage inflicted to Iraqi cities by the so-called Islamic State has exceeded $100 billion, particularly when it comes to the economy and major infrastructure.
and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1425B, and today's date is November 14th, 2017, and the title of the episode is, It Has Begun. Russia and Syria are now asking the U.S. to leave Syria. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. I uploaded an interview with Bix Weir. It is on the X22 Report Spotlight YouTube channel. So all you need to do is go over to YouTube, type in X22 Report Spotlight. It will bring you right to the video. Or you can come over to the website x22report.com site or the newsentinel.com site. All you need to do is scroll down a little bit, look over to your right-hand side. You'll see the video there. You can play it right on the site. Or you can go to Steemit. That's steemit.com/@X22Report, and you can play the interview on Steemit. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, A.J. Sessions, he was testifying in front of Congress, and it looks like Attorney General Jeff Sessions directed senior federal prosecutors to evaluate certain issues requested by congressional Republicans. Now, they're looking into the Uranium One deal and the alleged unlawful dealings related to the Clinton Foundation. And it looks like, and hopefully this will move forward, it looks like they might open an investigation where they're going to be looking into this. Now, the Republicans want a special counsel. They want to hire someone, bring them in, allow them to do this. A.J. Sessions kind of fighting this off. And we're going to have to see where this goes, but this should be investigated. It looks like there was a lot of underhanded dealings with this, and I think this is the right direction. And again, all of this information that is coming out is directly tied to the cabal and what they've done over the many, many years, where they've been deceiving the American people. They've been working for themselves. They've been making themselves very, very wealthy, blaming it on all others, and we can see that it's all falling apart. We see already out in Hollywood with the child trafficking, the pedophilia, and all these individuals that are being called out for sexual harassment. That's coming out. We also see it starting in D.C. right now. And this is going to spread because all of this was hidden from the public, and now the truth is coming out. We see the EU Parliament. They're launching a control campaign urging voters to support the European project, because what we see right now is there are many, many countries out there saying, listen, we'd like to leave this European project. The UK, they have their Brexit, but again, they're still part of the system. And we see other countries are looking at this. Italy, well, Catalonia would like to remove themselves from Spain, and we'd have to see where they would go from there. And we see that the EU completely, rejects independence. Spain rejects independence. But there are many other countries out there that are looking to leave the European project. And many people are saying that this European project is going to fail over time. And again, this was created to help the agenda of a one world government, where the different countries in Europe were all reporting to one central banking system. And the central banking system started out where they were just creating currency, but eventually they were telling these countries what to do. And these were non-elected leaders. And now the EU is getting worried. We can see that they're trying to push their agenda to keep the whole entire system together. Out in Venezuela, we understand there's major, major problems there, but as we can see, Venezuela is dealing with the petro yuan. We also see Russia is making a move, and they are going to write off $3 billion in Venezuelan debt, which is going to be a little bit of a relief for the Venezuelan government. And Russia will sign an agreement with the officials from Caracas to write off $3 billion in debt, which Venezuela currently owes to the Russian Federation. This move is widely seen as a goodwill gesture, and they're hoping that since they're allowing Venezuela to do this, they will allow Russia in to help with maybe their natural resources. Maybe they will write contracts with some of the companies in Russia, and we can see it at the same time. This is what happened with Cuba, because Russia wrote off $3 billion in debt, and Cuba promised joint projects in energy, transport, and healthcare. And this is why the U.S. stepped in and started relations with Cuba. This is one of the reasons. There are other reasons that go along with this, but this was one of them because they saw that Russia was making a move economically with Cuba. They didn't want this to happen. So this is why all of a sudden Obama came out and said, whoa, 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 and it wasn't just Obama. There was other individuals saying, we can't let this happen. This is why he came out, sanctions don't work. This is why we need good relations, because they saw what was happening. Russia and China, they're going around the world, and they are making economic deals throughout Africa. They're making deals throughout the Middle East. They're making deals throughout Asia. They're not using armed forces. They're not invading countries. They're going into countries saying, listen, we can help with all these projects. We can fund them. We can work together. This is what the U.S. used to do. And then what happened was the cabal took over, slowly but surely, and we turned into a warmongering nation where we went into all these countries, devastated the country, and had regime change. Because these countries really didn't want to deal with the United States, the cabal. And we forced them into doing what we wanted. And this is what happens at the end of a cycle, because these countries were moving away from the dollar. Libya was moving away from the dollar. Iraq was moving away from the dollar. They wanted to sell their natural resources, not using the petrodollar. They wanted to use gold. They wanted to use other currency. The UN said yes. And this was a problem because those in the cabal, they made a lot of money off of this system. And what happens is once they hear about this, they need to stop it. And this is why they use military force. If you really look back in history, at the end of each one of these empires, they spread themselves too thin. They invaded all these countries. They tried to hold their empire together. And eventually what happens, it falls apart. This is what is happening right now. The monetary system is falling apart. The empire is falling apart. And it's almost done. We're at the end game here, people. We see out in Zimbabwe, something is going on. There are tanks on the streets. They're talking about a coup, and we're going to have to wait to see what happens, but it looks like something is in the works right now. Now, we already see, and we mentioned this before, and we knew it was coming, that Russia and Syria, they were weeks away from eliminating the Islamic State. Russia actually said about 8 weeks, and that brought us to the end of this year. And we can see Russia and Syria, they're already pushing trial balloons to see how the United States and the coalition forces react to this message. And the message is, you need to leave Syria. Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he has slammed the U.S. for its presence in Syria being not only illegal, but deeply counterproductive. Because again, the United States, the coalition forces, they've been supporting the Islamic State. They've been hitting the infrastructure of Syria, allowing the Islamic State to gain more land, supporting Al-Qaeda, supporting the moderate rebels. This has nothing to do with democracy. This has nothing to do with a grassroots movement. This has to do with the cabal pushing their agenda. And now Syria and Russia are saying, I think it's time for you to leave. You're here illegally. And basically, they're saying that if you don't leave, this is an act of aggression. Actually, it's an act of war. And we can see right now that they're saying that the U.S. actively aids the Islamic State by evacuating terrorists from zones where their forces are being eliminated by the Syrian troops. The U.S. fails to fire upon the Islamic State terrorists when given a clear and safe opportunity. The always illegal presence of the U.S. in Syria violates the Geneva Agreements, which as recently as the weekend the U.S. committed itself to uphold. Syria is being prohibited from exercising its rights to liberate the entirety of its legally recognized territory because of the illegal U.S. presence in Syria. The U.S. proxy militia under the charge of Kurdish militants are part of these wider problems, and we can see already that Syria and Russia, they are now pushing the agenda. They wanted to see what the United States would do, how they would react to this message, and we can see already the U.S. is not reacting well. And we see already that Mattis is out there saying that the U.S. won't leave Syria until the Islamic State stops fighting. Which, what does that really mean? He didn't define fighting. Syria is a sovereign nation. Assad is the elected leader, the recognized elected leader of this nation. The United States and the rest of the forces are in this country illegally. And we can see right now, this is just the first step. What they're going to do is they're going to officially ask the United States, probably through the UN, to leave Syria. And this is going to be a problem because the cabal doesn't want to leave. They still want to be in Syria, but they're not allowed to be. And the rest of the world is going to look at this and say, well, wait a minute. This country, which is a sovereign country under the UN and around the world, it has an elected leader, and they're asking this country, the US and the coalition forces, to leave, and they don't want to leave? Wasn't this what Nazi Germany did? Didn't they invade countries and they never left? Isn't the US doing the same thing under the illusion of terrorism? I mean, think about it. We've occupied, not saying we, but the cabal has occupied all of these countries. And the cabal will not leave. They won't leave Iraq. They won't leave Libya. They won't leave Lebanon, Sudan, Somalia, Ukraine. You name it. They invaded, they conquered, and they're staying. They killed hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people had to leave these countries. And we see already that time is ticking down now. The clock is ticking down. We knew it was coming. Here it is. This is the trial balloon. They wanted to see what the United States was going to do. And of course, they're using all different types of excuses that, we can't leave because if we leave, there's going to be another terrorist group that takes its place. We need to support the Kurdish territory. I mean, they're coming up with anything and everything. They're even using the Geneva Convention, and we need to follow this. And they're just coming up with everything they can possibly think of why they need to stay. And there is no reason for them to stay. Absolutely no reason. And when a country says, listen, you need to get out, you need to get out. Or it's an invasion. It's an act of war. So we're going to have to see where this goes, because we're going to see that Russia and Syria, they're going to keep this message up, and they're going to continually push this message. And we can see the cabal is not going to react too well to this because their plan is falling apart. Now, we know that they're trying to push this event with Iran. This is going to push their agenda, where they're going to have to act and push their false flag, their war making, much harder right now because they are running out of time. And like I said, by the end of this year, the Islamic State most likely will no longer exist in Syria. Al-Qaeda most likely will not exist in Syria. And this is the time frame that we're looking at. So we're watching the cabal, we're seeing what they're doing, and we can see they're getting ready to push an event because they don't have much time left. The economy is falling apart. The system is breaking down. And I'm talking about the real economy. I'm talking about the fake numbers at the stock market or whatever the U.S. government gives us and the Fed gives us. I'm talking about the real heart of the economy, where the people work, the people produce, the people spend. That is breaking down. And if that breaks down, there's going to be nothing they can do. So the clock is ticking down. We're definitely going to see something happen very soon because they have no other alternative. So we're looking at Iran. We're looking at North Korea. We might even be looking at Syria, because if they just let all of this implode and they lose Syria, they don't start a war with North Korea, they don't start a war with Iran, they don't push any type of false flag event, the cabal is completely done. And this is why they're not going to let it happen. They're going to go out fighting. They spent hundreds of years of preparing for this. They've been doing this for a very long time, infiltrating the government. And they're not about to give up right now. They're about to push their plan forward. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.